Forget about the internet as we know it. Companies worldwide are already building the next generation of the web. A virtual landscape of gigantic dimensions that could change our perceptions of what's real and what isn't. Many believe this new online world will revolutionize industries.
It's an enormous potential.
But it could also give rise to a new level of harassment and abuse.
That's not a world anyone wants to live in.
So what will the internet of the future look like? And how can we make sure we don't repeat the mistakes of today? From DW, this is Techtopia. And in this episode, we investigate what kind of internet we'll be using decades from now. We explain what's behind the buzzword Metaverse. We have insights into an industry pouring billions into the technology. And we explain why it's high time to talk about safety and privacy. And if this might sound premature, with much of the technology still in its infancy, well, listen to this.
When something negative happens, it is real and it is happening. And the more we underestimate that, the more we're going to be in trouble in the future.
This is Nina Jane Patel, and what she experienced in an early version of the next internet offers a glimpse into how things can go terribly wrong. But before we start, a trigger warning. We will be discussing sexual violence in this episode, so if this is something that may affect you, please watch with caution.
My experience symbolizes that fear that we all have about the future of a metaverse, a dystopian future. I'm Nina Jane Patel. I'm a psychotherapist and a doctoral researcher. Originally, I'm from Canada, and now I live in London with my husband, Nimesh, as well as our 4 children, and of course, Duncan, the dog. I'm really a movement psychotherapist. I've always been fascinated about human self-expression through movement. As a child, training as a dancer and spending some time as a professional dancer as well. I'm doing doctoral research on the metaverse, specifically about the psychological and physiological impacts of immersive environments.
So, when new metaverse hardware was released, Patel was eager to try it out.
I was curious, so I put on the headset and created the account and entered the digital environment. You have your hand controllers that help you navigate through the space. Most people end up, I think, walking around, kind of exploring the space and seeing what's happening. I didn't expect anything bad to happen.
Soon after, however, things would take a terrifying turn. We'll get to what happened, but first, let's understand what people mean when they speak of the metaverse. Today, as we go about our lives, we already rely on the internet for practically everything we do. We need the web to communicate, to find our way from A to B, or to keep ourselves informed about what's going on in the world. But this online world doesn't feel like the reality around us. It's essentially a 2-dimensional version that is projected onto screens. That's why when we talk to each other in a video conference, it feels different from talking face to face. The vision for the next generation of the internet is to shatter the screen. Instead, the idea goes, people in the future will use virtual reality devices to access a 3-dimensional world where they can teleport themselves from one place to another, attend lectures, watch concerts, or meet with their colleagues. A virtual space where, just like in the physical world, people use their hands, facial expressions, and entire bodies to communicate, and where haptic sensors in the devices vibrate to create a sense of touch, allowing them to explore what's around them as if it was really there. To describe this next evolutionary leap of the internet, people now use the term metaverse, which was actually coined in a novel back in the 1990s. Already today, users are meeting in early versions to play games or just to hang out. Now, you might have seen screenshots, and they probably looked somehow awkward. Honestly, I thought so as well. And it wasn't until I put on a headset myself and took a trip into the metaverse that I understood it really feels different from the web of today.
You put the headset on and it's a 360-degree digital environment around you. You select your avatar. You start off entering the space as in kind of your personal space, and then you choose when you go into the social communal area.
But when Nina Jane Patel set out to explore one of those social spaces, things quickly spiraled out of control.
3 male avatars surrounded me and started being verbally aggressive, and then started sexually harassing me, and then continued to, which I can describe no other way, kind of grope my avatar and then proceed to kind of make physical actions that represented a sexual assault in some capacity of my avatar, while a 4th avatar was taking photos. I didn't really understand what was happening. A part of me was like, am I in the wrong space? Is this the wrong room? Have I done something wrong? And I asked them to stop once I realized what was happening. I tried to move to another part of the space. So I teleported over. They very quickly and aggressively followed me. And then continued to kind of say horrible things. And I had kind of frozen, realized, you know, about 3 minutes into it that I could take my headset off. That's how it ended, because they weren't going to stop no matter how many times I asked.
Do you believe that what happened to you that day was an isolated incident?
No, it's very clear that my experience is the tip of the iceberg.
She may well have a point. In our own investigation, we came across several other users who described similar experiences.
To some of us researchers, posing as a 21-year-old woman of color, went into Facebook's Metaverse platform to see what the experience would be like. Some of us is a global corporate accountability organization, and part of what we do is we hold tech companies to account. As our researchers kind of explored the platform more and more, they came across different types of worlds. They were invited to different parties and different rooms that they entered, and interacted with lots of different users. Within an hour of going on the platform, one of the researchers experienced sexual assault. They witnessed homophobic slurs. They witnessed gun violence. Some of the behavior that they came across was extremely concerning, and had, you know, a real impact on them.
So when we hear about incidents where people didn't feel safe, didn't feel comfortable in the metaverse, we take this very seriously. We as Meta, we do have a responsibility.
That's Marie-Theresa Weber, who works for Meta, previously known as Facebook. The company is building huge subsections of the metaverse called Horizon. Those spaces where both Nina Jane Patel and the Sum of Us researchers experienced harassment. We'll hear more from the company and how it wants to better protect its users. But to understand how things could go wrong, let's first try to find out how we got here.
As early as the late 1960s, scientists began connecting computers. But it wasn't until the 1990s that the rise of web browsers and personal computers made the web available to anyone who could afford it, giving rise to the first generation of the web, which was made up mostly of static websites. That changed in the late 2000s with the emergence of social media and mobile internet. Increasingly, people began using their phones and platforms like Facebook to navigate the web.
During the early days of that Web 2 era, social media platforms were seen as an enabler of democracy, a force for good to give a voice to the voiceless. And they were. But as the startups behind the platforms grew into the world's most powerful companies, it also became clear how social media could be abused to manipulate public opinion or incite violence. Today, as we are approaching the twilight of this second generation of the web, countries have laws and companies have guidelines for how to moderate content. And yet, those only do so much. Which brings us back to Nina Jane Patel in London.
In the days that followed the abuse, Patel couldn't stop thinking about what had happened.
If it had been one of my children putting on the headset that day, it would have been much more impactful and traumatic to them. I felt the need to write about it in order to share this so that we can talk about it and we can acknowledge that this is currently what's experienced in the metaverse and to do something about it.
She published a blog post about her experience. It prompted mixed reactions.
Many who exclaimed, how could this possibly happen? This shouldn't happen. To others who exclaimed that why didn't I just take the headset off? Why didn't I choose a male avatar? It's just a fantasy. It's just imagination. It's not real. What are you talking about?
And when her story was picked up by a journalist, the hate took off.
Within an hour of it being published online at that midnight that day, I got several really hateful messages that were targeted to me and threats about myself and my daughters. It continues to be worrying. I don't want to be identified as the woman who was sexually assaulted in the metaverse.
Nonetheless, Patel kept speaking about what had happened.
I don't enjoy sharing my story, and I wish I didn't have to. But if we underestimate the potential of the metaverse and how integrating into our lives is going to change human behavior, we're going to be in a lot of trouble further along down the line.
That's why she herself has come up with a plan for how to help make the metaverse a safer space.
More about that in a bit, but who is actually building the metaverse? Players range from tech giants who are mostly based in the US and China, to video game developers and emerging startups. All of them want a slice of the cake. And business experts believe that cake will be enormous.
By 2030, it's been projected that the metaverse economy will reach to 5 trillion in its value, and that's a huge.
That's why we've seen a spike in investment over the last few years. And when in late 2021, Mark Zuckerberg announced the rebranding of his corporate giant as Meta, the term metaverse also became known beyond the tech world. Since then, the hype has somehow subsided, and some analysts are already saying that the investment isn't paying off. And yet, experts told us that those calls could be premature.
There is no metaverse yet, and that's the problem. There is still developing metaverse. Even the company like Meta doesn't have the fully developed metaverse platform.
But Meta is working on it at full speed.
Where we envision it is that 1 billion people will use the metaverse in 2030. So that's an enormous potential.
The tech giant wants to develop the key digital infrastructure that will underlie this internet of the future.
We're investing enormously in building out the foundation for these new technologies. We're talking about virtual reality, augmented reality, AI, artificial intelligence, also natural language recognition, to lay the foundation for the metaverse.
This new online reality, the company believes, will change industries across sectors, allowing universities, for example, to make lectures available even in remote regions of the world.
There are many use cases, from medicine to education to culture, business and work.
And most of that, Meta says, is yet to come.
We are talking about a vision of the next 10, 15 years. And we think that will eventually also replace the internet as we know it today.
So the digital spaces that exist today, the ones where Nina Jane Patel experienced abuse, are only the first step towards the next iteration of the internet.
Just like we went from massive desktop computers to high-resolution phones to surf the internet, the devices we need to get into the metaverse will become smaller and more discreet over the years. Soon, slick glasses or even contact lenses could replace the clumsy headsets of today, and hand tracking systems could make hand controllers obsolete. That will be the moment when many believe we'll start using the metaverse outside of our homes as we go about our lives. In this new, mixed reality, AI technology will scan everything we see in real time and tweak it according to our personal needs, for example by transcribing street signs in a foreign country. That's how, step by step, the borders between the virtual and physical world will crumble, transforming the metaverse from the closed-off virtual reality it is today into a digital layer that is superimposed on our physical reality. A hybrid world where analog and digital realities merge and that is becoming harder and harder to lock out of.
To be clear, we're still many years from making this leap from a virtual to an augmented mixed reality. But if and when we get there, people could end up spending much of their time in this new space. And it's against that backdrop that Meta told us it was quick to react when it first heard about abuse in its sections of the Metaverse.
Meta has introduced a couple of safety measures for the Metaverse. For example, a boundary, so a safe boundary around your avatar that people cannot come too close. A second thing that we've introduced, for example, is the safe zone, that you will be able to click out of the situation, to zoom out of it, and to be in a safe space on your own.
But will those measures be enough to protect users?
So we welcome any measures that they take, but really we'd argue that they're a drop in the ocean. Introducing, for example, a personal bubble function, whilst it's really welcome, isn't really hitting the core of the problem here, which is that they're not able to effectively moderate problematic behavior.
What do you think about those safety measures that were introduced?
Yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction.
And yet, Nina Jane Patel is also convinced more will be needed to build a safe metaverse.
The Metaverse could be a magical, exciting experience in addition to our lives if we begin to intentionally and intelligently shape the technology.
So she herself became involved in building the next internet.
The Metaverse is just like the atom splitting. It can be used for helping humanity, or it can be used to destroy it. How are we going to put safeguards in place so that we don't get burned?
Together with her husband, Patel has founded a startup called Kabuni. Their plan is to build a safe metaverse space for adolescents, a virtual school of sorts where kids between 8 and 16 years old can learn while being shielded from abuse.
We have worked with educators across 3 continents in our research and development program.
But Patel also believes it's not only up to companies to build a safe metaverse.
We do need to ask our governments and regulators to come in and start making decisions about what's legal, what's harmful, and what's illegal.
Which brings us to the question of rules for the Metaverse, and if there are any.
So the rules that govern the metaverse at this point are certain national rules that apply for every platform you go on, but also the rules that are put in place by individual platforms.
In other words, the same rules we have for platforms like Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok currently also govern the new digital spaces popping up all over the metaverse. Rules that were written with a very different online reality in mind.
In the metaverse, we need to think about rules in a different way. Virtual reality is actual reality. The way that your brain processes interactions that happen in the metaverse is through your hippocampus. And that's the same way that memories are created when you are walking down the street with your friend, or you're having coffee with your grandmother, or you're going on a first date.
That's why the abuse Nina Jane Patel experienced in the metaverse felt so real. And experts told us safety isn't the only area where new rules are needed. There's also the question of what's done with the masses of data recorded by new VR devices.
Take your pupil dilation, for example. The type of information that you can get from what your pupil reacts to can indicate very intimate things. If I'm sexually attracted to the person I'm looking at, if I'm likely to be telling the truth, if I'm likely to develop some diseases, like schizophrenia, ADHD, autism.
Remember how we said that the rise of today's second generation of the internet turned a few startups into some of the world's richest companies? Well, to this day, they make most of their profits by collecting data about their users and analyzing it to sell specifically targeted advertising. Now, couldn't data from the metaverse, which is so much more granular and intimate, be used to supercharge this business model?
I haven't heard of companies doing this yet. However, they haven't said that they're not going to. If they are creating the metaverse to make money, and they're not making money yet, it is a an attractive nuisance or attractive danger.
Our aim is to have a more diverse business model. Advertising in the future will also play a role, but will be one aspect. Another aspect is that we will build the hardware and that we will sell our hardware.
And Meta says that it gives users the final say over what's done with their data.
When you buy your headset, eye tracking, the tracking of facial expression, per default is turned off. And when you use it, the data that is being processed is only stored on the headset, on the device, and will not leave the device.
I'm glad that they're taking this issue seriously. I think there are several historic examples as well as current legal cases which say that, Meta isn't always either aware or isn't quite coming clean about how data is being used.
And when it comes to hate speech, for example, documents unveiled by a whistleblower have shown that the company has repeatedly failed in fighting harmful content.
How do you want to ensure that history does not repeat itself then?
We have learned a lot in the past years. We have been there, we have seen hate speech. Now we are so transparent when it comes to how we design our rules, how we enforce our rules. A very, very important aspect is we don't do this alone. We will not build the metaverse alone. And we'll start the discussion very early with legislators around the world, but very important also, obviously, with experts from civil society.
So who should write the rules for the age of the metaverse?
This is the question at the heart of it all, right? We don't have to do things in the same way as we did with the internet. So who made the rules previously? Companies, predicated on their business model.
Regulations and policies should be coming from government without a doubt, because it's not just about businesses, it's about people.
We're really urgently pressing lawmakers to really get this on their agenda. We're really seeing a situation that we saw 15 years ago, when these tech companies really started to grow very rapidly, which is, the regulations can't keep up with the technological development. And before you know it, those problems are really embedded and out there.
Nina Jane Patel says that, despite its risks, the opportunities of the metaverse keep exciting her.
I love to describe the metaverse as the possibility of dancing with your pixels, so that you step into the digital environment, you're 360 degrees around you, and the opportunity to engage with the digital world in an exciting new way.
Now, she says, it's in our hands to decide what kind of online world we'll end up having decades from now.
It's got all the potential in the world, the technology, and it's not the technology that's going to hold us back. It's being built as we speak, and we all have a responsibility right now to be conscious of our digital engagement, to shape the future of the metaverse for the better. Because otherwise, the pathway that we're on currently is more of that dystopian future that none of us want to experience.
As you're watching this, developers worldwide are working on new technology that will move our societies further into the digital realm than ever before. Whether we'll end up calling it metaverse is unclear, as is what it will look like and who will run it. But what's clear is that in front of our eyes, a new digital public space is emerging. Stories like those of Nina Jane Patel illustrate that we need to debate what personal space means in such a world where virtual and physical realities merge, and how to protect the intimate data we leave behind. Ever since today's web emerged, lawmakers have often been too late in their efforts to regulate it. Often individuals or entire societies had to get harmed before change was implemented. As the era of a new internet is dawning, this is our chance to do things differently.